Welcome to Reroute Reflections, a podcast about what it really takes to change direction with intention. Around here, we believe change works better when we take the time to reflect and, when necessary, reroute. We're here to challenge assumptions, share stories, and discuss the tools that can help us navigate change with confidence. Right. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the next episode of Reroute Reflections. Today is a really exciting topic. It's a topic that I admittedly know very little about, which is why I brought somebody who does know a little bit more about it into the podcast today. So I'm really excited to get started and have this conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about something that is, I think, on everybody's mind, and that is AI. We're going to dive into some best practices that you can use as leaders and as change professionals to help manage the change for your teams, leaning in on what we've seen in the past as it relates to digital transformation, like digitization, and also having a discussion around what's the same, what's different, and what do we need to do in order to manage the complexity of this change with confidence. I am so excited to have my guest here with me today. Chinkal Patel is a partner at Mantrax Software Solutions, a Toronto-based software, go Canada, and an AI advisory and development firm. Mantrax provides technology agnostic advisory services across multiple industries, specializing in new software and AI product development, legacy application modernization, and business system optimization. Wow, that is a lot of really cool stuff that you guys do. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Hi, Andrew. Nice to be here. Happy Friday. I'm glad I could finally make this happen. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Happy Friday indeed, honestly. I feel like I have to always record these podcasts on a Friday because it's just like I just feel like I'm just so much more in a relaxed mood, and it's perfect to have these types of conversations. Maybe so we'll start with you kind of telling us a little bit about yourself, kind of what got you into this work, for myself as well as for those who are listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a partner at Mantrax, and I got here. It was a bit of a long journey. So I'm a chemical engineer by training, University of Waterloo. I spent the first 10 years of my career working in the private sector for a manufacturing company that was developing products for aerospace, automotive, defense. Then I shifted to Deloitte after doing my MBA at Rockman. And there I continued working in industrial manufacturing. But with the digital transformations being a big thing for the last 20 years, all the projects that Deloitte was doing ended up being digital transformations, whether it was like legacy application modernization, building analytics toolkits, adopting intelligence software, right? So then I was able to merge manufacturing with a lot of digital transformations. And then I spent several years doing that, was a platinum member on all the airlines and all the hotels and everything. And I said, okay, I've lived the life and I love the work, but I wanted to do it on a little bit on my schedule. I also thought there was an opportunity to help mid-market clients with what a lot of the big enterprises were doing, or the big firms were operating, but the conversations were not taking place in small companies and mid-market, and the tools, the techniques, the knowledge, the expertise. I think there is still a gap, and I started Mantrax to kind of bridge that gap, basically.
Amazing, honestly. I totally get. I don't know how you do. I've not come from like a consulting background from like the Deloittes or anything, but like I do have a lot of friends who were in there, and the amount of travel that you guys had to do. I don't know how you did it. I hate to say it, but I can't stand the travel. Like living out of the suitcase. I don't know. I know I'm doing consulting right now, but luckily not a lot of travel. But I don't know how you guys did it. What was it like? You had to leave Sunday and like come back Thursdays,
Yeah,
like
pretty
weekly?
much.
Was that how it
Every
went?
Monday morning or
Wow.
Sunday night. And I think, when I was like single, it was great. I loved it. You got a lot of
Yeah.
cards, you stayed at nice hotels, you got access to a lot of smart people.
Yep.
But there's a time and place for that. And I know a lot of people who still do that and they love it. Actually, I was downtown last night. I'm like, oh, I missed this. But, there is the benefit of also having, like starting your own firm. There's different challenges. And it's just a different journey. I think that I'm still
Yeah.
connected with a lot of partners at Deloitte, and they have a great work-life balance. They're doing amazing stuff. And like I said, I was I was going to the Ironman ceremony last night. I'm just like, oh, I miss this life, but
Yeah, sometimes you do get it. I totally get it. I feel like I would get through a lot more books if I could travel more, even if I had a decent commute. Like the office that both of us kind of work in is like only 10 minutes away from my house. Doesn't leave a lot for like podcasts or for like reading and stuff. So I feel like that would really help with with that for sure. So honestly, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I think AI is like on everybody's minds, and if it's not on everyone's minds, I feel like it should be just around like what it is that it's going, what impact it's going to have on not just the company and how it operates, but the people as well, which is obviously at the forefront of what we do. And so I think the first part that we want to kind of step into is just like let's start at the beginning and let's talk about, you know, how do we kind of set up those right foundations? And maybe even before we get into that, we kind of talk a little bit about what are some of the general applications for AI? Like categories, what are some of the major areas that you're seeing companies use AI in?
okay. So maybe I'll just start with, like what is AI, right? Because AI is a big discipline, right?
Mm.
It's like, big data or analytics, right? They're very broad terminology. So AI, and how I think about it or how we think about it at Mantrax, really there's about 6 or 7 different categories. The first one is machine learning. And it says, think about predictive analytics, right? So algorithms that are trained to learn patterns and make predictions. Then you have your large language models. So think ChatGPT. These are models that have been trained on large text-based data, and they're looking to, they'll take information, they'll take the databases they work from, and they'll generate a response. The third category is generative AI. This is a model creating new content based on learned patterns. So it could be text, it could be image, it could be audio. So, creative writing, if you use a blog writing tool, or if you're generating music, that's a generative AI application. The other big bucket is computer vision. So this is AI analyzing pictures and classifying them, for example. The other category is natural language processing. And what this category talks about is really understanding and generating human language and analyzing it. So things like text to speech, sentiment analysis. The sixth one is robotics, which is basically, AI interacting with our physical world. So think about, robots, cars, etc. And then what's driving all this and where is all this built is the last category, which is AI infrastructure and machine learning operations. So these are, pipelines that are for learning, cloud AI infrastructure, and probably these 7 categories are really how we think about it, but we're probably oversimplifying as well. There's probably branches within each of these 7 categories as well.
And so it's like I feel like I'm learning so much here, and I feel like I myself have so many questions just around those different types. Like you talk about like image, being able to analyze images, and like even like the text and the sentiment analysis is like for ChatGPT, and this might be a stupid question, so you let me know, but is like ChatGPT using like multiple versions of like these AI kind of features, or is ChatGPT kind of focused on one area?
So ChatGPT, I would say, is it's a large language model, and there's different. ChatGPT is just a model, right? There's lots of different GPT models out there, lots of different large language models, and some of them do combine different areas of it. ChatGPT largely is taking large volume of public databases and then using that to generate a response for you. But there are other models that are being built that's a combination of LLMs and generative AI, where they're taking the input, but then they're using it to create new content as well.
I see. Okay. And so with all of these different like categories of AI and like the even the things around like I guess privacy and like what data that you can use for that pipeline that you mentioned for the AI infrastructure, like can you share maybe like some tangible examples around what you've seen companies kind of do or use as they're starting to build AI capabilities? Like what seems to be like the most common, use case that you're seeing with the clients that you guys are working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're seeing, we don't touch in robotics, like we're not building, like robots or tools that are interacting with the physical world, or we're always not building AI infrastructure. That's, like a lot of capitals, the big companies work on that. But we have some examples of really the first several categories I talked about. So machine learning, custom LLMs, generative AI, even computer vision, and natural language processing. So if I can give you an example, maybe in each of these categories. So machine learning, a classic example really is inventory forecasting, right? So if you're dealing with lots of SKUs and lots of part numbers, and we're seeing a lot of requests for work where customers want to understand what is my forecast by combining the company's historical data, the forecasted demand by their sales team. If you're in a retail business, seasonality, weather, buyers' expectations and trends. So using that to manage supply and demand correctly, and then planning logistics around that to make sure all the product is arrived in time. So that's machine learning applications for predictive inventory management is a big area. The other big area is customer churn production. So again, if you're a large company where you have multiple account managers interacting with your company and the customers are ordering products, and there is customer service, there's sales, there's R&D, there is quality control interacting. So you're going to have a lot of data on a customer in your systems, and that data can be analyzed to predict, is this customer going to churn? Because if you've had lots of interaction with them, and then over a 6-month period they're not ordering as much product, or they're not as engaging as much, or complaints are coming in, or requests are coming in, these types of data can be analyzed to measure customer churn.
I love that. I mean, immediately what I was thinking about was like, can it find a way to like anticipate when I need kitty litter? Because I find like I'm always running out of that. So
Yeah.
if we can get that mark onto this and just like automatically like ship me kitty litter when when I need it, so I don't have to forget.
Well, I mean,
I think that would solve my problem.
well, sure, e-commerce companies are doing that, right? Every like 2 months, and then it's been like 4 months now, right? If the companies are using this model, they should be able to send you an automatic newsletter saying, hey, there's a 10% discount, right? And that's how e-commerce
That would be
really
wild.
works.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Honestly, it's something that I struggle with, having 2 cats and a dog. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off topic. Please continue.
No, I can go on for a lot of examples, but a couple other like key ones I can give you is we're seeing a lot of custom LLM requests where companies are even building, these are like large companies that actually have capital to build their own custom private LLMs because they don't want to give data to obviously this public OpenAI LLMs, right? So one example is a semiconductor or pharmaceutical companies where they want to create a private LLM to help their research teams. Say the old way of doing it is I have a junior R&D project manager, and I've asked them to research product number KN4255, and I'm telling them, go ahead and find all the history on like R&D related history on this part number. Now, if you are a big company and you have like half a dozen or more R&D research centers, each staffed with like 50 to 100 people, this individual project manager has a huge job in front of them, and it could be like 6 months or a year-long project, right? Because a part number might also have a history itself, right? So imagine now having a custom LLM where you can just plug in saying, give me all product development history on KN4255. And the LLM in minutes will generate the full summary for you, research all your databases, and even give you the source link of where that information was found. So huge improvements in productivity, right?
It makes sense. I mean, like as you're talking about it, like even, just like I can't help but think about like the foundations or like the things that you would need to do in order to build like that organization up. Because I mean, I assume a lot of companies are rushing into this AI trend, right? Like I think they're just thinking about like, hey, AI is everywhere. We got to jump into it. Let's just introduce AI. How are you seeing, leaders kind of start that conversations to determine like when, what are we going to do in order to drive that productivity? And are you seeing like maybe companies moving a little bit too quickly and not really thinking about like setting the right foundation first? How are you seeing the starting of that conversation to say like from the idea of like we need to jump on this AI train to like actually executing it or starting to execute it?
Yeah, no, we see both. We see like, it should be strategic, right? I mean, if you didn't move on the digitization journey early enough, and for the last 5-10 years, you have been shifting your manual documents, whether it's in R&D or quality control or service and maintenance. If you haven't taken those manual processes and created well-governed databases, that's a bottleneck for you to leverage AI, right? Because you're steps behind. So where we're seeing some of the challenge with leadership is that, well, if you don't have the foundation, you can't really just all of a sudden just adapt AI tools, right? Because garbage in, garbage out, right? The other thing is leaders are not understanding AI in terms of what does it mean for my business, right? Different businesses are going to have different impact. So just adopting AI for the sake of AI or downloading a subscription to a tool and putting all your information in that tool is not really the best strategy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. It sounds like there's a lot around, and you're hearing a lot about it. Like for companies, what is your AI strategy, right? And it's almost like from what I'm hearing, it's like maybe it goes beyond that, and maybe there's this like element of having to reframe a little bit of that. And there was an article that was just published, which we'll put in the show notes, talking about this like reframing of like what's our AI strategy into something that's more like where can AI add value to our current mission, like what it is that we do and what we want to deliver, rather than just trying to stamp AI for the sake of it. Like how do we become more strategic, like you said, around like how can we integrate this into our organization in a way that's strategic and is going to add value to our employees, our customers, our shareholders, whomever. I think that's really what you're kind of landing on. And like I think the key enabler around digitization as like a key first step makes total sense. If you're taking the R&D example, and I think we talked about this before, it's like you've got scientists who probably have like a manual physical notebook that they've been jotting, their notes on. Like if that continues to be there, how do you can't get that value unless you digitize that first, right?
Yeah, so I mean, like AI applications that are working on databases, then you're analyzing the patterns in some cases, and then you have algorithms that are studying it and making predictions. But if your database doesn't exist or is poor or is missing big chunks of information, then the quality of input that the model and algorithms can generate is also going to be lacking those information.
Mhm. I was just going to ask about the leaders that you're having these conversations with. Like, I imagine, at least from my experience, it's like, you know, moving fast with pace, especially with something like AI, which seems to be like exponentially kind of exploding, just like almost everything else that's happening in the world today. How are you seeing, like, are leaders accepting this concept of like we have to build the enablers first before we start thinking about introducing AI? Or are you seeing like folks just like not really caring too much about the strategy per se? They just want to do it to check the box that we are in the AI game.
Unfortunately, we're seeing a mix of both, right? I think everybody is just excited about AI and just wants to stay current. So we are seeing a lot of leaders are saying, you know what, like educate us, tell us the different use cases, like how should we be thinking about this, right? And investing the time into educating themselves, educating their leadership and their middle management, and then investing in lots of workshops to look at assess their readiness, assess the potential use cases, learning what their supply chain is doing, learning what their customers are doing, learning what the trends in their industry in terms of AI adoption are. And that I think is the right approach, right? Before jumping in, let's take a step back and let's understand how is AI going to change my industry and my business specifically. Because even within each industry, you have the enterprise level players, you have the mid-market players, and you have small businesses, and there's going to be different impact on all of them. And then you have some organizations that just can't wait to just deploy ChatGPT subscriptions to everybody, right? And that's just, I think, in some cases, that is just enabling poor behavior in terms of just learning just how to use a particular tool, but then you're not thinking about what are the productivity gains, like systematically I'm going to make on processes and my innovation strategy by deploying that energy in the right application.
That's so well said, honestly. And I feel like now is probably a great time to start talking about like the employee side of it, because that is another piece that I know for us, is top of mind. But as you're kind of going through the process of like introducing these AI or digital transformations just in general, but also these AI initiatives, how are you seeing, like, what are some of the maybe the misconceptions that you're seeing as it relates to organizations when they're trying to get the employees on board with AI? Like, how is that kind of, what does that landscape look like when they're trying to deal with the employees part of that change and that transition?
I think so. There's a couple of misconceptions. Like any digital transformations, employees will not adapt quickly without support, right? And whether that's a new AI tool or you're moving to a completely new ERP system after 20 years, right? It's the day-to-day activities may change, so they're going to need support, they're going to need training, and it's also about change management and culture, not just the system implementation, right? One-time training is also not enough. And depending on the skill set makeup of your organization, AI may not be intuitive. Like many of us are not just used to using ChatGPT or other models and typing and optimizing your prompts and learning from it. But if your skill set is different, your employee skill set is different, the digital tools that you deploy may not be intuitive for everybody. So
I,
it's different.
I
Yeah.
completely agree. I completely agree with that. Like, I think I was listening to a workshop and I was telling you about this. I think somebody was saying like it's, AI is, and they simplified it to this idea of like, if you can read or write, you can use AI. And I think that's like a gross underestimation of like how complex that system is. And like, it has such like a steep learning curve, at the end of the day. Like, yes, anyone can use it, but to use it well and to not like fall into the issues that can come with using these tools, like relying on it like 100% and assuming like 100% accuracy without double checking key facts. Like, you can go down like a real rabbit hole if you don't really understand like what its capabilities are and where limitations are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like if you're building your own internal AI tools or using a platform and then feeding in your data sets, the first iteration is not going to be perfect, right? It's like any other implementation. You're going to have to be patient and have a phased optimization plan. Like algorithms get better once you give them feedback. So the training and optimization of models takes time. If you're an organization that says, okay, we're going to that R&D tool. Hey, we're going to implement this R&D custom LLM tool. All of our 100 PhDs and masters and all the R&D project managers starting tomorrow use this tool. That is going to be a failure, right? Because
Yeah.
you're going to want to deploy that tool in a pilot scale with experts and subject matters who have helped you write the requirements for the prompt engineering and the design of the tool, have them tested for a couple of months, see what the accuracy is like, and then do a phased rollout to the entire department to manage expectations and to have a realistic plan of the rollout, right? And that scenario you
Yeah.
can see will be different if you're rolling out a tool in the shop floor in manufacturing companies versus a service industries where people are taking an app on the field services and out on a construction site expecting all of a sudden
Yeah.
this thing to work perfectly, right?
Right, exactly. And I mean that just invites the question of like how are you getting these people to not only come along with you on the change, which is always a difficult thing, but kind of be part of that process to then create that tool and help build that pipeline of knowledge that it needs directly from these people who potentially can be out of a job or their job completely like transformed at the end of it. How are industries kind of like getting these people to like help them build something that might take them out of a job?
So I think it depends on the application and the industry. If you're building AI tools versus just, like taking a subscription and doing something where you're in-house building AI tools, you're going to need subject matter experts, right? To support that phased rollout, to train the model, to develop the right prompts, etc. So if you're going to have some resources that are going to have all the knowledge and you're going to want to help them help you train this new system and then support the next roadmap of this particular tool, right? If it is, hey, I know we have this great employees but that job is not going to be there, what we're seeing organizations do is see if they can find other roles in other departments where they may be suitable. So if I'm optimizing my quality department with AI capability and all of a sudden I need 30% less people, but my shipping and receiving has always been understaffed, can they move over to that? Or, another example, right? In the cases where it is going to be a job loss, I've seen many examples of doing it right and doing it wrong. I think if it is going to be a true headcount reduction, be empathetic, be proactive, give them the tools and planning for the transition, whether it's the HR coach or career planning or resume writing. And that all depends on the culture of the company and how they want to manage that transition, right? But we talked about this. That is going to be headcount reduction is the end goal. You have to think about all the people that are staying and what's the impact on them as they're watching this execution by the company, right? So there's a lot of aspects to managing this type of change, and there's a lot of ways to do it right and a lot of ways that it can derail. So I think our strategy has been make sure that it's strategic, the business is stable enough to absorb all this change, and then there is the infrastructure in place in terms of resources, your leadership's capacity, bringing in outside experts, and then make sure it's a realistic plan. And once you have all those things, basically you're giving yourself enough time to think about the different scenarios and how you want to manage each scenario.
Yeah. And that's perfect, I think, in terms of like how to manage that, because we're not living in like a, fairyland of this idea that in some cases AI implementation is going to result in, or I would say maybe in all AI implementations, there will be some change in terms of roles, responsibilities, but, being transparent. I think the way to kind of sum it up is being, human. And if you were in that position yourself, what would you want to see your company do? I think is always a really good gut check. I can't help but think about like my ethics course around when you're doing something unethical, and you would like always have this one question you'd have to ask yourself before you determine whether what you're going to do is the right thing or the wrong thing. You say like, if this would appear on the news, like how would people respond? And that's kind of your gut check to say, all right, am I going the right direction or not? I feel like we need to maybe we should always apply that in the scenario of like how we're treating employees in terms of like major change, whether it's an M&A where employees are being kind of integrated into a new company, whether it's an AI transformation where their roles and responsibilities will be changing, where their jobs may no longer be required. You kind of think about the approach that you're taking, and you're like, hey, if this approach and my name appeared on it in the news, how would people look at me, right? And would they say like, okay, you know what, that person did what's right for the employees, like no problem, like let's move on? Or are they gonna really rip you a new one? I
Yeah.
think that's probably a really good gut check to think about.
Yeah, I mean, like the change also depends on the individuals themselves, right? If they're an experienced individual and they've seen this movie a couple of times, they're gonna absorb the change differently. Or if they're someone who loves to learn and are jumping on the AI wagon and they're taking courses, they'll be happy to jump on the team, or they'll be happy with the career shift where if the role isn't there. Or if you're talking about someone who's a rugged manufacturing company where there's a job impact and they've been in the company for 20, 30, 35 years, they're near retirement, that's going to have a complete different impact on them, right? So how you manage the change really depends on the company itself, the industry, the makeup of your employees. And the one thing I think is super important that people forget about is each company has its own culture, equity, and history, right? So if you've managed change very poorly for the last 10 years, whether it's AI or redesign or acquisitions, and if you're going in now pitching a perfect AI strategy, it's not going to resonate that well, right? So culture and that emotional equity that the company has with its employees also plays a role, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love the concept of like, this is not just when we think about readiness for introducing these initiatives, it goes far beyond just like technology readiness and like, do you have the infrastructure set up? Do you have those key enablers? But there is that element of like cultural readiness too. Like, have you built up a culture of psychological safety within that organization so that as you're going through such a major change that, employees feel that they can speak out and share their opinions, not just to like make sure that they, you're, taking care of from a wellness and health perspective, but also to help the initiative succeed. Because if employees feel like they're being heard, like the example that you gave around, like if you're going to start the initiative, give these individuals a plan for what happens afterwards. Maybe, you second them temporarily to help support this project with the expectation that once the project is over, they're going to fit into this new role, which is an elevated role because a lot of the complicated, mundane work that they no longer need to do, we can elevate them to do some of the higher skill stuff that they just didn't have time to do because we have AI.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
bringing them in, right?
yeah, well, like when one of the things that we were developing is natural like language query tools, right? Where imagine, a lot of companies have a lot of analysts and managers spending time manually collecting data or analyzing reports and consolidating, reports that they've downloaded from ERP systems or their databases and putting them in the final report that leadership wants. So we're now
Yeah.
building, query tools where those reports can be generated in a snap, but they still need the human interaction because in the search tool, you can say, if, one example I can think of is, I'm a membership-based organization that has 50,000 members. I want to know how many members have PhDs and MBA and are likely to churn. So it will give me the report, but it'll also give me the query. So my subject matter expert can look at the query and validate that this is the right data. So the job is now changing from gathering and consolidating and reformatting data to accuracy, right? And
Yeah,
then,
exactly. And that's the higher level type of work that, humans are meant to do, right? And that's really what this, if done properly, what this AI transformation or this AI, I guess, world that we live in can really do for us is like let's leave the work that is taken away from what makes humans so great at what they do, dealing with people, dealing with complex issues. Let's hand off all the stuff that we can't, we shouldn't be doing, like the
what we don't want to do,
analytics and
right?
the
Like repetitive
and we
data.
don't want to do, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't want to do. I'm like, there's so many things I can just think about that if I could just pass off, even just from a running a business perspective, that if I could just pass off to AI so that I can focus more on clients or business development or the things that I know I need to be able to do, like if it can take away some of that research that work that I spend hours and hours doing in the click and me just kind of vetting it for accuracy, I can then focus on like the stuff that is what makes reroute, reroute. And like
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
the analytics and stuff doesn't make it. And so I feel like you're right. There is definitely a right way and a wrong way to do it. And I feel like when it comes to employees and organizations, it's like just making sure that you've got those foundational elements, in place so that in the end, you're really telling that you're showing what that is. Because I think at the end of the day, like I think all organizations have that goal in mind of let's elevate the roles of individuals so that they can focus on the stuff that only humans are capable of doing, and like let's just try to find a way to like take away the stuff that they don't want to do. And I think that will be beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like any transformation, whether it's AI or digital or business reorg, it should be strategic. It should move the company forward, whether it's more productive, expanding product lines, expanding markets. And if there is strategic alignment, your employees will also have a quicker buy-in, right? And a great example I saw was a CNC machine shop where they updated the software with AI capability, where the software was now automatically putting in the conditions and process conditions and all the fields for the product based on similar products, versus they actually had a subject matter expert and he loved studying similar part numbers and getting that spec sheet ready. Like that was his full-time job. And now that job became like basically verifying it and giving the feedback to the model saying, no, 89% is right, just change these three things. But instead of that being a nervous thing, what the company did is said, okay, you know what? We're now going to chase those more complex parts that we were able to do before. or go after those high-end industries like aerospace and additional ones that we didn't have the capacity to do because our smartest people were too busy running production and managing quality control. So that's a great example of a positive shift, right? Where it's not necessarily about
Yeah.
cutting jobs, but how can I, upskill my
Yeah.
resources and, for the betterment of the business.
Exactly. And it's an element of like really it being a trying to focus it up, be a co-creation rather than it be about casualties, right? Like that's not what the game is. There's, I think the focus on AI just because it's so obvious is the expense side of it, right? It's like, okay, we can trim expenses as we do this because maybe we can cut some people or jobs, and that's one way to do it. And I think that's a closed-minded way of doing it because there's so much potential on the revenue side as well for a business. If you think about the upskilling part of what AI can do, if you do it right, yes. And we've seen examples already of companies that maybe chase a trend too quickly, focus too much on the expense side, and they're kind of coming back and saying, "Oh, you know what? Actually, we need some more people to come back and help support what we do." On the customer service side, introducing too many chatbots where
Yeah.
folks aren't really into getting help from a chatbot. I will say, ChatGPT, I love you to death, but your chatbot drives me absolutely mad. And so so I feel like there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to do it. But I think as a guiding principle of like focusing on this as a co-creation, seeing where you can find benefits both on the expense and revenue side. And, I think that's where you're going to see the most value. I don't know if you kind of, I don't know if you agree with that statement, but that's kind of the way I see it.
Absolutely. I think, it is about adding efficiency. It is about adding productivity. But what are those productivity and efficiency gains getting you? They're improving your gross margins. They're making you, ship better product out with better quality. Does that mean you can take on more customer? You can take on more orders now?
Mhm.
Can you, expand geographies? Can you, go into different segments now? And in some cases, it is about we're more productive now. We can take out the manual steps, and it is an impact on headcount, and that's okay, right? Like we've been through this before. Manage the
Yeah.
change with empathy, with the human element. Give the employees the respect they deserve, and because as the employees leave, they take that experience with you, right, or with them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and like you said, the people who stay, they're watching every step, right? And
Exactly.
and that's going to affect the overall culture. And I think the only thing I would add is like don't underestimate the change either, because I have seen that too. Is this idea of like, AI seems like it's easy. If you've ever text messaged somebody, people think like it's the same thing, and it's like if don't underestimate the complexity around an AI transformation and the values of focusing on the people side of it to help enable the success of the initiative so that it doesn't become a hindrance or you're not able to realize the potential of this whole new technology. Um, we have definitely gone, oh, well, not that we had a script, but I mean, I feel like all of my stuff, I'm just kind of going all over the place, and we always run out of time, and I have committed to a 45-minute episode to myself. And so I feel like we're gonna kind of go through and kind of wrap things up. But honestly, I feel like it was an incredible conversation. I know myself, I've learned quite a bit just around like what AI is. I mean, I feel like I was an early adopter to AI. As soon as I heard about ChatGPT, I think, the first. I maybe if I had my customer number, I bet you it was like 00001. That's like because I feel like as soon as I heard about it, I was like all over it. But I think it's exploded into so many different things. I didn't even know about all these different categories that existed and just the elements of setting that right foundation. And you mentioned like we've gone through this before with digitization, and I feel like it was the same story around there. It was like you need to make sure that you've set up the right infrastructure to enable digitization. Otherwise, again, like you said, you're just in a situation where you just like got garbage data
Yeah.
just being generated out. And so that is definitely something that we need to take note of, but also, start to think about it as like you're not going to get it right the first time, like you mentioned. And, staying focused on like that ability to, reroute as you go.
Yeah, I mean, think about
just
a regular
to get it
product
right.
development cycle, right? Like, you pilot
Yeah,
something, then phase one, phase two, phase three, right? And, think about it realistically and how you would do product development, right? This is not any different. So,
yeah. I love that idea, honestly. Like I see so much similarity between, product development and marketing and as it relates to like internal stuff too. It's like, if only we treated like employees like customers, we got like some fancy celebrity kind of like, introducing like a new workday platform or like a new AI tool. Could you imagine that? You got Ariana Grande just like being like, let's use this AI tool. Like, look at how much more efficient you can be. I wonder how many people we'd have as early adopters that
probably a lot
um
more. Yeah.
I yeah, right? I love about Ariana Grande. Wicked out in theaters on Friday. I'll end it here just with kind of like the way that we typically do. We have this segment called the Change Shelf. And so we always ask our guests to recommend a book, podcast, article that's really influenced the way that you're thinking around kind of this subject. So is there a resource in mind that you want to share with the listeners?
So in terms of change management and just digital transformation in general, like one of the tools that I have frequently used in the last like 15, 20 years is a framework by Dr. Timothy Nasher. And it's really, you probably have seen it, Andrew, but really it talks about managing complex change. And it basically is 5 by 5, and it says vision, skills, incentives, resources, and action plans. If they're all aligned, you're going to have change. If any of those are missing, you're going to have either a false start, confusion, resistance, and something's going to be off, right? And I've taken that framework and I've worked with leadership to say, okay, what are the 5 important things that you think need to be correct or right for your change to happen correctly? And we've kind of modified that. But I think that framework has been great for complex change management.
Amazing. I have not heard of that, honestly, and I am going to look it up. Honestly, I feel like I've learned so much from you. So this has been great. I'm so happy to have you here on this episode. And then the other question I always ask, and I sometimes forget, but I'm not going to forget this time, is can you reflect on the last time you've had to reroute in kind of your journey, whether it be as an entrepreneur or how you manage these projects? Curious to hear that.
Yeah. So the first half of my career, I spent in manufacturing, traditional R&D and product launches. So it was 100% always waterfall. You had to make, the Gantt charts. It's got to trickle down properly. Then you got to get the budget approval. And then, you have to, then you can start and then you measure against those milestones. At Mantrax, in the last 15 years, I've had to adapt to agile delivery, which is we deliver in 2 weeks increments. And we have to have a demo ready at the end of every single 2 weeks because the customer gets to see whatever we have coded. So that was a mind shift initially, but we've taken and combined that too early. So we've taken a waterfall and agile, and we call it pragmatic project management because you need to see the overall vision and then you need to break it down to chunks. But agile requires a lot of discipline. You got to get that daily 15-minute meetings, all that kind of stuff. So that was a ways of working daily habit change for me, especially when you have multiple customers. Like every day our mornings from like 6 a.m. to typically about 1 p.m. It's just back-to-back 15-minute touch points with clients.
Daily huddles.
Yeah, daily huddles. So that took me some time, but I'm used to it now. But
Yeah, it's definitely, and I feel like just with everything, the actual like solution is always some type of hybrid.
yeah, it is.
It's like that seems to always be the path of the right path to go on. And yeah, daily autos I was definitely skeptical about, but they are they are really valuable. So those are definitely something that comes from agile that I'm a huge believer in for sure. And who knows what's going to be next? I'm very curious. I'm sure there's something else, after agile. So curious to see what that's going to be. So yeah, oh yeah.
No, I was going
Is there something?
There is something, but I can't think of the acronym right now. But it's like enterprise.
Oh my
scale.
God, it's already here.
It's enterprise scale
Is it?
agile, but I don't have the acronym.
I
right
have
now.
heard of that. Okay, okay? I gotta look into that because I have heard of that before. I thought it was just some type of agile approach. Okay, well there you go. It's already here. You heard it here first. So thank you again, Chinkal. I feel like every time I have a conversation with you, I'm always coming away with learning so much, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to not only just record the podcast, but to get ready for it, to prep for it. So honestly, really appreciate you having here. And it was a great conversation, as I knew it was going to be. And so thank you so much again for taking the time.
My pleasure. This was my first podcast, so thanks for having me. And I hope
Oh, well,
I
that's
added some value.
100%. Honestly, how was it? Was it good? Did you feel it was like, it was like not? I don't want it to be too like stuffy, and like too. I want it to be very calm. It's like we're just having a conversation over coffee. It just happens to have a camera in your face.
No, it was good. It was good. It was definitely like, I got this like lighting and it's been changing colors, like going through all the rainbows
Has it really?
as we speak. So next time I think I'll do the setup a little bit better.
Oh man, you put it on the disco setting,
I
so
guess
now
so.
it's kind of just like it's all red and blue and stuff.
I'm
And it's just going,
an
I gotta
amateur
figure
when
out
it
how to do
comes
that.
to at least this kind of stuff. So
And I said we're both in the same office, right? So I feel like people are like walking by and they're like, "Oh my god, that person must be on a podcast." 'Cause they got the light, the microphone, and they walk by you and it's like, "Oh, I wonder that person must be on a podcast too." I wonder how many people are putting together this exact same podcast.
I don't think we're that important, Andrew, but okay.
Yeah, they're not even looking at us. And if anyone's looking at me, it's because Luna, my dog, is lying down, and that would be the only reason why they would look this direction. So she is a favorite in the office, I think. Um, all right. Well, thank you again for this, and thank you all for listening to the podcast today. I hope you found it as enjoyable and as informative as I did. A few things, just to remind everybody. So we do have a newsletter that comes out every month. And at the beginning of the month, so if you're not on the mailing list, feel free to join. We'd love to have you there. I do a lot of like very interesting things on that. We have a section called Andrew's Anecdotes where I kind of just dive into and give my perspective, unfiltered, very candid about like some of the key topics that we've talked about in terms of the podcast and or just things that are happening in the world of change management. So be sure to check that out. Also, we've got a webinar coming up in December. So December 10th and 11th, we'll be doing the second podcast in our series, the game plan, preparing and planning. We're going to be using tools like Monday.com and Miro to show kind of how we take the details around impact assessments, the plan or the change plan, the communication plan, and put it into a visual tool that can really help leaders, employees, and members of the project teams help follow along with you in a way that's just a little bit more fun than an Excel doc. So I'm really hoping to see you all there. And as always, don't be afraid to reroute. Bye, everybody.
Fine.